After the Bronze Age collapsed, the world did not end. Rather, it reorganized. Civilizations and their rosters changed. Centers of power shifted. What remained was competition and glory. Welcome to the Classical Antiquity Pennant. Two quick things before we get into our number 10 entry. Check out our rules video linked below. It includes the categories that we're covering, the general guidelines for the tournament, date ranges, and rules as well. Going forward in the description, I'll include a link to a document that fleshes out every civilization in the list and all 8 categories for each, so you can see an expanded rationale. Secondly, honorable mentions. I'll do these quickly. They were not strong enough to get to our top 10, but I still wanted to shout them out. So the early steppe civilization and all the peoples that might encompass. Number 1, the Germanic world. Number 2, the Celtic world. Number 3, the Andean civilization. Number 4, and 5, the Central Asian Silk Road Civ. There were even more honorable mentions in these. I just couldn't mention all of them. The intro would be 20 minutes long. Perhaps some of these civs will return for later eras, so stay tuned for that. With that, no more time to waste. Let's go. Getting us started at number 10, we have the Nile Red Sea Civilization, a score of 55 out of 80. This is a custom entry that combines Kush, Napita, Meroe, Dumit, and Aksum. Basically the Nile Valley and Red Sea world of Northeast Africa rolled into one. They made the list because they survived besides giants, whether it be Egypt, Greece, Assyria, Persia, take your pick. This region was constantly surrounded by major powers. But the Red Sea civilization was never erased. That shows up in their scorecard. I gave them an 8 out of 10 in longevity and an 8 out of 10 in civilizational endurance. Their main strength, I'd say, is endurance under pressure. Kush even ruled Egypt during the 25th dynasty, which helps justify their 7 out of 10 military capability. This wasn't just a simple passive trade civilization. Kush could conquer Egypt, and Aksum later projected power across the Red Sea into southern Arabia. Their architecture also earned them a 7 out of 10. Kush and Meroe built pyramids, temples, and royal cemeteries, while Aksum later added massive steles, tombs, and stone monuments. I'd say the weakness of this civilization is global reach. They were regionally very powerful, but they did not export a dominant language, legal system, philosophical tradition, or world religion as the same scale as some of the other civilizations we'll look at in a moment. That's why I gave them a 6 out of 10 for their religious influence and their knowledge only 5 out of 10. Their secret sauce is pretty cool. I called it the Imperial Shadow Power, 8 out of 10. They were not the loudest empire in the room, but they were great at surviving besides louder ones, absorbing Egyptian, Greco-Roman, Red Sea, and Christian influences without losing their own identity themselves. I landed them at 55 out of 80 after all this math, number 10. Coming in at number 9, the Purple Network Civilization. Its formal name would be the Phoenician Punic Civilization. Their score is 61 out of 80. The ancient world apparently had a branding department because we just went from the Nile Red Sea civilization to another civilization with a color in its name. Like I said, this formerly would be known as the Phoenician Punic Civilization, consisting of Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, Arwad, Carthage, Cadiz, and the Western Punic colonies. The name works here because Phoenician identity was deeply tied to maritime trade, luxury goods, and of course, the famous purple dye associated with the region. Their main strength was leverage. This civilization did not need to conquer the whole map to shape it. They used ships, ports, colonies, trade routes, luxury goods, and writing to project influence far beyond their homeland. I gave them a 10 out of 10 secret sauce, seaborne leverage. A small coastal civilization turned the Mediterranean into a network. Eventually, Carthage turned that network into a commercial and military superpower. I gave them a massive 9 out of 10 score in knowledge and innovation. The Phoenician alphabet is one of the most important communication technologies in human history. Throw in navigation, shipbuilding, trade systems, those awesome purple dyes, accounting, and colonization, this civilization was incredibly innovative in many practical ways. Militarily, 8 out of 10. The early Phoenicians were not a land conquest machine, but Carthage became the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. Hannibal invaded Italy, fought Rome on its own turf, and inflicted some of the most famous defeats in the history of Rome. Their weakness, I'd say, is survivability, though, against those larger territorial empires, unlike our friends in the Nile Red Sea civilization. I gave them a 6 out of 10 for civilizational endurance. Carthage nearly became the master of the Western Mediterranean, but in the end, Rome destroyed it. Their governance score is a solid 7 out of 10. Phoenician city-states were flexible and independent, while Carthage built serious institutions, councils, naval organization, and colonial administration. But the wider Phoenician Punic world was never unified enough to survive sustained pressure from Rome. 6 out of 10 for their religious and ideological influence. They had their own gods, like Baal, Mekart, and Tanit, and they mattered across the Phoenician and Punic world, but their religious legacy didn't endure globally at the scale of some of the civilizations ranked above them. Purple Network, 9 out of 10, 61 out of 80, 9 out of 10 on our list. At number 8, we have the Mesoamerican civilization, score of 63 out of 80. For this custom entry, we're including the Olmec, the Maya, the Zapotec, and the Teotihuacan civilization, and any other related Mesoamerican traditions. Again, it's a broader civilizational world, not one super accurate empire. Their main strength is independent complexity. Mesoamerica developed amazing things completely on their own. Elite political systems, ball courts, religions, cities, pyramids, calendars, astronomy, and so much more that I don't want to list right now, completely on its own. I called their secret sauce Independent Genesis and gave them a 10 out of 10 score for this remarkable achievement. It's kind of like when you give your little cousin their own separate save file on a video game and expect them to just kind of mess around, but they somehow beat the game on the hardest difficulty. Their architecture and engineering score is also pretty elite, 9 out of 10. Teotihuacan helps justify that score alone. You've got the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, the Avenue of the Dead, and honestly one of the great planned cities of the ancient world. Monte Alban adds another major example of urban planning built on a flattened mountaintop. How cool is that? The Maya developed writing, calendars, mathematics, astronomy, and historical records, which are also very impressive, even if they were wrong about the world ending in 2012. Across Mesoamerica, the 260-day ritual calendar and the 365-day agricultural calendar show a deep system for organizing time, religion, agriculture, and power. 8 out of 10 for their longevity. While the Olmec declined, the Mesoamerican civilization kept going. Zapotec centers rose. Teotihuacan became a giant. The Maya continued to develop city-states, art, writing, calendars, and their own politics. While individual cities might have fell, the broader cultural system endured. Their weakness is isolation and political fragmentation. I only gave them a 6 out of 10 in military capability as well, not because they lacked warfare, but because during this time period, they didn't really create a huge transcontinental empire. They had city-state conflict, captives, warrior traditions, conquest imagery, but not an empire on the scale of Rome, Persia, or Han China. 6 out of 10 for their governance as well. While Mesoamerica had rulers, priestly classes, tributes, cities, dynasties, and diplomacy, it didn't produce one unified bureaucratic empire within the range for this video, which is 1200 BC to 500 AD. Number 8, 63 out of 80. At number 7, we have the Neo-Mesopotamian civilization. Don't call it a comeback. Actually, I think that's exactly what this is. They came in with a final score of 66 out of 80, and by Neo-Mesopotamia, we're referring to the combined efforts of Neo-Assyria and Neo-Babylonia, basically the Iron Age heirs of the older Mesopotamian world, led by the Sumerians and Akkadians. Check out the Bronze Age Bowl video if you want to hear more about that civilization. This, however, is Mesopotamia's late game build. I gave Neo-Mesopotamia a perfect 10 out of 10 for their military capability. The Neo-Mesopotamians, specifically Neo-Assyria, were not simply good at war. The Neo-Mesopotamians / Neo-Assyrians were good at making conquests repeatable. When Assyria defeated a rival, it didn't just celebrate the victory and move on. Territory was absorbed. Tribute was collected. Entire regions were folded into a larger imperial structure. What made Assyria so frightening wasn't a single army. It was the system behind that army. And the same idea earned Neo-Mesopotamia a 9 out of 10 in our rankings for their secret sauce. I called their secret sauce the imperial operating system, because Assyria figured out something many ancient powers struggled deeply with. How do you keep control over territory after you win? Under rulers like Tiglath-Pileser III, Assyria became one of the most organized empires of the ancient world, earning them a governance score of 9 out of 10. This empire stretched across huge portions of the Near East, yet remained remarkably effective at administering that conquered territory. But again, Neo-Mesopotamia wasn't just Assyria, it's also the Neo-Babylonians. And Babylon brought a different kind of power to the table. Under Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon became one of the most famous cities in the ancient world once again. Its walls were legendary. The Ishtar Gate remains one of antiquity's most recognizable monuments. And whether or not the Hanging Gardens actually existed, people are still arguing about them 2,000 years later, and I'd say that reputation hasn't come by accident. Architecture and engineering, 8 out of 10. Knowledge and innovation, a very impressive 9 out of 10. When most people hear Assyria, they think about the great armies, and they should, but they probably should think about libraries too. The Library of Ashurbanipal preserved thousands of tablets covering mythology, religion, science, astronomy, and so much more. A huge amount of what we know about ancient Mesopotamia survived because somebody bothered to save these records. I gave the religious and ideological influence a 7 out of 10. Babylon remained one of the great sacred cities of the ancient world, while Assyria linked imperial power directly to divine authority through the worship of Ashur. Their religious traditions didn't survive as long as other major world religions, but their myths, stories, and ideas influenced their neighboring civilizations for the centuries to come. The biggest weakness, I'd say, in the Neo-Mesopotamian civilization is political durability. 7 out of 10 for longevity, 7 out of 10 for civilizational endurance. For a civilization that looked pretty unstoppable on paper, its time at the top is pretty brief. Assyria collapsed in 612 BC. Neo-Babylonia followed in 539 BC, not too long after. While their empires died, their influence did not. Mesopotamian scholarship, astronomy, and so much more continued shaping the ancient world long after both states disappeared. I gave them a final score of 66 out of 80. Not the first chapter of Mesopotamian history, an even better sequel. And somehow, more dangerous than before. At number 6, we have the Israelite civilization with the final score 68 out of 80. I'll either use Israelite, Judean, or Jewish civilization interchangeably throughout this entry. This civilization has a really strange resume, and honestly it was really fun for me to include in the video and do some research on. Most civilizations throughout world history, not just in classical antiquity, survived by holding the territory that they gained. This civilization survived after losing its territory. Because of the inability to defend themselves fully, I did cap their military at a 6 out of 10. I do want to highlight some military achievements though. The Israelites and Judeans surely had kingdoms, armies, fortified cities, and their own periods of independence. The Maccabean revolt, for example, even pushed back Seleucid control for a period, and helped create the Hasmonean state. But let's be honest, most of the time the Judean civilization was fighting just to stay alive. But again, that's why it's so fascinating, because while its military is a 6, its religious and ideological influence is a perfect 10 out of 10. This civilization helped shape Judaism, and through that influence the other two Abrahamic religions, Christianity and Islam. It's a pretty astonishing outcome. A civilization with a relatively small footprint ends up helping shape the beliefs of billions of us modern people. The main strength of this civilization is ideological endurance despite the hardships. I called their secret sauce portable civilization and gave them a 10 out of 10 for this. While most civs needed capitals or a strong king or a very strong army, the Judean civilization just needed some stories, text to write it down on, and memory to survive. Unfortunately, the Jewish homeland became something you had to carry with you in your heart, as this civilization faced challenge after challenge. You have the Babylonian exile, Roman domination, the destruction of the Second Temple. Events that might have broken other civs did not shake the Israelites. 9 out of 10 for longevity, and civilizational endurance scores a 10 out of 10. Figures like Ezra helped rebuild Jewish life, law, and community after the exile, again outlining the resilience of the Israelites. I gave a 9 out of 10 score mainly because of the Hebrew Bible, which carried Jewish stories and beliefs all the way to modern day. One of the most influential and thought-provoking human projects ever created. Surely the Civ had to have a top 10 spot. I think number 6 is fair, 68 out of 80. At number 5, we have the Indic civilization with a score of 71 out of 80, finally cracking that 70-point threshold. If Rome mastered power and China mastered administration, India might have mastered ideas themselves. For this civilization, including the Vedic world, the Mauryan Empire, Gupta India, and the early Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions. Religious influence earns a perfect 10 out of 10, of course. But India didn't just produce religion, it produced entire ways of understanding reality itself. Ideas like karma, dharma, and enlightenment would influence billions of people across Asia and beyond. Because of this, I gave their knowledge and innovation a perfect 10. This is one of antiquity's greatest intellectual powerhouses, contributing to philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and literature. For their secret sauce, I called it spiritual evolution. While many civilizations focused on conquering territory, India spent centuries exploring internal questions like, what is the self? What is reality? Why do we suffer? How should people live? These were deep civilizational projects. Now, the Indic civilization wasn't just based on philosophy, they also built powerful states. The Mauryan Empire, for example, became one of the largest empires in ancient South Asian history, and its most famous ruler, Ashoka, became not known just for conquest, but for questioning conquest itself after the devastating Kalinga War. The biggest weakness was political unity. Empires rose and fell, but the civilization itself kept going. So I gave them a longevity and civilizational endurance of 9 out of 10. India survived not by becoming simple, it survived by becoming layered. And that's why Indic civilization lands at number 5 with a score of 71 out of 80. Many civilizations asked how to rule the world. India wanted to know, how can we understand it? All right, we're officially in the final 4. At number 4, we have the Persian-Iranian civilization with a score of 73 out of 80. And the first thing to understand about the combined efforts of the Achaemenids, the Sassanians, and the Parthians is this. Persia is not just the empire that Greece fought against. That's like describing Rome as the civilization that Hannibal annoyed. It's way too small and downplays their achievements. I gave their military a 9 out of 10, very respectable. Under 2 of their greatest leaders, Cyrus the Great, who we've covered on the channel, check out that video, and Darius, Persia built one of the largest empires the ancient world had ever seen, stretching from Egypt and Anatolia all the way down to Central Asia and parts of India. Later, the Parthians humbled Rome at the Battle of Carrhae, and the Sassanians spent centuries fighting Rome and Byzantium. This was clearly one of antiquity's heavyweight powers, kind of like the Tyson Fury of the ancient world. Persia's greatest achievement wasn't conquest, it was organization of a diverse empire. Of course, I had to give their governance a 10 out of 10 for this. The Persians helped pioneer a solution to one of history's hardest problems. How do you rule millions of people who aren't speaking the same language, who aren't worshiping the same gods, or aren't sharing the same culture? The Persian solution was surprisingly flexible. Local traditions and religions often stayed untouched. Elites continued in their positions. The empire created a larger political framework without completely erasing the people and their traditions inside of it. It kind of reminds me of the model Alexander or even the Mongols would later use to keep people in check. And that leads directly to the secret sauce, a perfect 10 out of 10. I call it imperial pluralism. While Assyria often ruled through fear, Persia excelled at ruling diversity. Different peoples, different languages, different religions, one empire. That was Persia's superpower. Their architecture and engineering also earned a respectable 9 out of 10. The ceremonial capital of Persepolis remains one of antiquity's great monuments, while projects like the Royal Road connected distant regions of the empire through communication, trade, and administration. But Persia wasn't just building palaces, it was building its infrastructure for its highly organized empire. Their religious influence scores 8 out of 10. Zoroastrianism became one of the ancient world's most important religious traditions, emphasizing stuff like moral choice, cosmic struggle, truth, and divine order. The influence of Zoroastrianism can still be felt echoing through later religious traditions. Persia also scores highly in longevity and civilizational endurance. The Achaemenids fell, but Persia didn't. Parthians returned, then the Sassanians returned. Again and again, Iranian civilization survived conquest, collapse, and political change. That's why longevity and endurance earn a 9 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10 respectively. Persia didn't just build an empire, it built a civilizational identity strong enough to outlive multiple other rival empires. That's why it came in with a 73 out of 80 for the Persian-Iranian civilization. Coming in at number 3, final score of 75 out of 80, the Greek Hellenistic civilization. This civilization's secret sauce was pretty simple. I called it the thinking machine. So for this entry, we're including Archaic Greece, Classical Greece, Athens, Sparta, Thebes, and then the wider world of Alexander the Great. So Macedon, the actual empire of Alexander, and the Hellenistic world in general, which includes Egypt, as Egypt was ruled by a Macedonian Greek dynasty during this period. The military capability of this civilization was a perfect 10 out of 10. The Greek city-states themselves resisted Persia. Sparta, of course, became legendary for its discipline, while Athens became legendary for its naval power. Thebes later shattered that Spartan discipline. Macedon then later changed the entire scale of the game. Philip II of Macedon, father of Alexander the Great, built the early war machine that Alexander later used to conquer the Persian Empire. And let's just emphasize this, we're talking one of, if not the greatest, military runs in history. 13 years was all that was needed to conquer a large chunk of the known ancient world. But Greece's real power was never only the sword. Religious and ideological influence also earns a perfect 10 out of 10. Greek religion mattered, of course, we know about Zeus and all the other Greek gods of the pantheon, but the real monster category here is the ideas, hence the thinking machine secret sauce. The great Western philosophers, right? Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all from Greece. Drama, rhetoric, started in Greece as well. Political theory, democracy, the idea of citizenship. The Greek world gave later civilizations a vocabulary to argue about really important matters such as truth, virtue, beauty, politics, and what the good life means. Knowledge and innovation also gets a 10 out of 10. This is the civilization that hosted Archimedes, the Hippocratic medicine, Herodotus, and of course, Alexandria as one of the great knowledge capitals of the ancient world. Architecture and engineering also scores a 10 out of 10. The Parthenon alone is one of the most iconic buildings ever built, and the Hellenistic world later added giant cities, theaters, libraries, palaces, and of course, the lighthouse of Alexandria. A main contradiction with this civilization is that while its longevity and civilizational endurance both scored an 8 out of 10 due to Greek culture enduring incredibly well, the political unity of the civilization was a complete mess. City-states often fought against each other. Alexander's empire fragmented pretty much right after he died. The Hellenistic kingdoms themselves were brilliant, but eventually Rome did absorb them. That's the irony here. Rome conquered Greece, but Greek culture conquered Roman education. That's why Greek civilization lands at number 3 with a score of 75 out of 80. At number 2, taking the silver medal in the Classical Antiquity Pennant, the Chinese civilization, with a final score of 77 out of 80. I called this civilization's secret sauce the continuity special. So for this entry, we're including the Zhou dynasty, the Spring and Autumn period, Warring States period, the Qin, and the Han. In other words, the formation of Imperial China. The Zhou gave China the mandate of heaven. The Warring States created brutal competition and major schools of thought that would influence Chinese philosophy. The Qin then unified China. Han then built on that system to make it more durable. It's one long timeline of continuity. Also, we talked about this in the Bronze Age as well with Shang China. Their military capability earned a 9 out of 10. The Warring States period is one of the most intense military laboratories in ancient history. It's kind of like World War I, but a very, very long time ago. Huge armies, crossbows, cavalry, siege warfare, fortifications, advanced logistics, and mass mobilization of troops. The Qin emerges from this chaos and unifies China in 221 BC. The religious and ideological influence of this civilization scored a 9 out of 10. This world produced Confucianism, Taoism, legalism, and the mandate of heaven. Confucianism alone became one of the most durable ethical and political traditions in human history. It shaped family, education, bureaucracy, ritual, and government for centuries to come. Confucianism continues to influence social standards in China even today. Knowledge and innovation also earned a 10 out of 10 in our scorecard. Chinese civilization developed major traditions in philosophy, history, agriculture, astronomy, medicine, you name it. I gave their governance also a perfect 10 out of 10. The Qin standardized weights, measurements, and currency. They enhanced the code of laws, built roads, centralized administration, and advanced writing practices. The Qin was harsh and short-lived, but Han China took much of that imperial framework and made it last. That's the key here. China figured out how to let dynasties die without letting their whole civilization go with it. I gave their architecture and engineering scores a 9. They built many amazing things: canals, tombs, cities, frontier defenses, and of course the terracotta army, showing massive state organization. The real reason China is this high on the list, of course, is longevity and endurance, 10 out of 10 for both. The Zhou fell, the Qin rose. The Qin fell, the Han rose. Then even after Han China fell, or weakened, the idea of China as a unified imperial civilization continued to survive. Other civilizations built empires. China built the idea an empire could come back again and again. That is the continuity special. 77 out of 80 in our number 2 spot. Can we get a drum roll for our number 1 entry? The Roman civilization. Who else could it have been? 79 out of 80. Not a perfect 80, because Rome was not perfect. Rome was violent, unstable, and constantly wrestling with civil war, assassination, succession crises, and elite rivalry. And for Rome, we're including the Roman Kingdom, Roman Republic, Roman Empire, and all Roman provinces up to the end of the era period, so that would be 500 AD. I think it's fair to say Rome's greatest enemy was often Rome itself. But even with that fatal flaw, no civilization in this tournament has a more complete resume. I gave their military capability a clean 10 out of 10. It started as a small, insignificant city-state, then it conquered all of the Italian peninsula, destroyed Carthage, absorbed the Hellenistic kingdoms that we just covered, took Gaul, controlled the Mediterranean, pushed deep into Britain, and challenged Persia. They held an empire across 3 continents. And of course, we have great generals from the Roman military: Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, Pompey the Great. We could go on and on and on. Rome's military genius was not just winning on the battlefield, it was being adaptable. Rome lost a lot of battles, they were not invincible, but they always came back. They would learn from their enemies, copy, modify, and improve their approach. Architecture and engineering, again, 10 out of 10. I feel like I could make a video just on the architecture. Roads, aqueducts, bridges and baths, forums and amphitheaters, deep sewage systems that were complex, harbors, walls, Roman concrete, the Colosseum, the Pantheon. We could really talk about this all day. Rome turned engineering into civilization, and their knowledge and innovation earned a 10 out of 10, not because Rome was Greece. Rome's genius was its practical knowledge: law, logistics, administration, urban planning, water management, citizenship. Rome figured out how you can make power repeatable at scale. I gave the religion and ideological influence also a perfect 10 out of 10. Christianity emerged inside the Roman world and spread through Roman cities. By late antiquity, Rome had transformed from a pagan empire into a Christian imperial civilization. It's one of the biggest ideological and religious transformations within the same civilization in all of world history. I called their secret sauce the Roman sponge. 10 out of 10. Rome would defeat enemies and learn from them. They'll take a little bit of Greek culture, a hint of Etruscan ritual, a tablespoon of Punic naval lessons, Egyptian grain, Eastern religion, philosophy, provincial elites, foreign soldiers, even Christianity itself. Rome metabolized diversity, and that was the Roman cheat code. Of course, their longevity and civilizational endurance are 10 out of 10. Its forms changed multiple times: a kingdom, a republic, an empire, a Christian empire. Even when the Western imperial system began to weaken, Roman law, Latin Christianity, the papacy, and political memory of this system lived on. Many civilizations ruled. Rome haunted for the eons to come. The only category stopping Rome was its governance, and this is why I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 in every single category. We know that Rome built brilliant institutions: the Senate, the magistrates, courts, provinces, governors. It was really advanced for the time. But it repeatedly failed at peaceful transfers of power. Civil wars scarred and eventually destroyed the Republic. Emperors were assassinated like every other day. Generals marched on Rome, their own homeland. The 3rd century crisis nearly shattered the empire. Rome governed the entire world brilliantly, but it could not govern itself, and that's why I gave them a 79 out of 80. But still, they are the winners of the Classical Antiquity Pennant. Okay, congrats to Rome, the winners of the Classical Antiquity Pennant. Y'all had a great season. We want to see if you could keep it up, though, in the Medieval Cup. I hope nothing bad happens to you all between now and then, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, if If you agreed with my rankings, disagreed with my rankings, found historical inaccuracies, or were confused by anything I shared, definitely leave a comment below. Would love to engage with you. Would love to hear if you like these type of videos or other type of videos. I've been doing the kind of more narrative-based videos, which was the United States video I made. This is a more hard historical facts and rankings type video. I'm still trying to figure out what I like to make, so I would love to hear what you like. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.